Patrick Bet-David just released his full new podcast with Tate, titled Andrew Tate Unleashed. The podcast went live on YouTube this morning. If you didn't get a chance to catch it, I'm going to go over all the various points that were discussed on the podcast with you right now, including the Matrix, LGBTQ, American politics, Elon Musk Neurolink, and religion. This podcast was probably one of the most impactful things I've ever watched on YouTube, and we need to get this message out there to the general public, so make sure you hit the like button and you drop a comment down below so we can get this in front of people's eyes. Now let's get into it. Now, one of the first topics I heard them discussing as soon as I turned on the podcast was money. Tate goes on to explain how once you have money, you no longer really care too much about the money. The reason why you want the money is so you can gain control back on your life, you can pay people to do certain things, and you can get your time back. We've heard Tate discuss this in many short form videos, how he doesn't care about the price of dinner, the price of clothes, the price of cars, the price of living, etc. What you really begin to care about is the control and freedom. Tate states a valid point in the video asking, why do you want money? You want money so you can pay people to do things and free up your time. This is why I believe Tate has such a strong opinion on gentlemen making money, because once they're making money, it's the first step that they can take to escape this matrix. And you and me cannot disagree that if you have a little bit more money, your life is going to be just a little bit easier. Now, next they discuss one of my favorite topics I love hearing Tate's opinions on. This is the Matrix. Now, Tate's view on the Matrix is that everything you see on TV, everything you see on the news is all a controlling mechanism, and most people don't know that they are all being lied to, and that everything is just a scam. Just be a good slave, go to work, pay your taxes, watch TV, and don't question anything. Think about how many people that you and me know that go to a job that they hate every single day. Now, why is this? Well, it's pretty obvious, because they need money, and they maybe don't have any other options to make money. Tate then brings a valid point up that jobs are a modern day slavery. He then goes on to discuss slavery back in the day and how it worked. So what would happen was a government would get slaves would complete work, and then the slaves would get housing and food in exchange for their work. But what are they doing right now? The government gets people to build them things, they give them money for their services, and now this money is being used to pay for their home and their food. And many people don't have much extra to play with. Now, who prints all the money? The government. So if the government can create something up out of thin air and give it to the workers in exchange for their time, you're still a modern day slave. And he honestly makes a valid point here. So now at this point in the interview, Tate goes into great examples with Pat on how the Matrix is still happening right in front of us in today's day and age. So I really like the comparison that Tate made with the agents from the Matrix to today's modern day people. He states that you could be having a perfectly good conversation with somebody for over an hour, and you bring up something like COVID or politics, and they immediately change into an agent. They immediately go against you and start to disagree with you, and then right before your eyes you'll see them change, and they will begin to hate you, they'll begin to dislike you, and they'll begin to discredit anything you're saying. His point in this comparison, I believe, is to show you that these people are similar to the agents in the Matrix, who will immediately spring into action if they find anybody that is against the Matrix. Tate goes on to explain how the Matrix today is a perfect explanation for what's going on, and he goes on to quote Morpheus, "If your mind is not free, then you could be one of them." Tate states that we have people with parameters who believe in family, God, love, tradition, taking care of yourself and others. Basically, people with moral standards. And then there are people with no moral standards that are completely empty vessels, or agents of the Matrix, who are programmed on what they're supposed to believe and or say. Now, Tate is repeatedly attacked on his stance on women and being labeled as misogynistic. And during the interview, he goes off on a tangent saying how he will do anything for women, he stands up for women, he believes that he should be at a peak mental and physical condition so he can protect any woman and feel safe walking down the street with them. He begins to rant about how he does more for women than any of these clowns do. He states that they are just weaponizing virtue and attacking him with it, and it's not even genuine virtue. He then states that matrixed individuals have very little parameters and so few virtues. Whenever that there's a virtue inside of them, it's only so they can take it and weaponize it and fire it right at you. Tate states that they don't care about any of the issues that they're defending. They don't care about race, they don't care about women, they don't care about gays. They're just an agent of the Matrix fulfilling their duty. When the podcast is live, I encourage you to watch this because it's very interesting to hear his take on this matter. Now, as we dive further into the interview here, Patrick asks Tate what his stance is on religion. He states how Tate has been openly a Christian since 2020, but now recently he has converted to being a Muslim. Patrick asked Tate about this quote he said, saying Christians don't have a religion anymore because they tolerate tolerate everything and stand for nothing. Tate states that there has to be an equal and opposite force to the evil in the world, and that equal and opposite force to all the evil is God. Tate goes on to explain how he has had this discussion with atheists about God, and how they have this conception that God is a man or a woman up in the sky. He states to them that you have to look at God as a concept and not a person. Once this is done, you can no longer disagree with the fact that God is real. Now, Tate gives a perfect example as to how God could save somebody's life with a scenario of two people being trapped on an island. So he gives one comparison of people trapped on an island who don't believe in God, and they proceed to eat this other human being so they can stay alive, because it's not against their religion. They can do whatever they can to survive. Then on the other island, there's a group of people who believe in religion, and they have no source of food, and although they're obviously thinking that they could eat this person to survive, they will not do it because their God says it's not allowed. So right there, Tate gives an example that God helped save somebody's life right there. Whether you believe that he doesn't exist or not, you can't argue with the fact that God helped save somebody in this position. Tate goes on to explain that Romania, where he currently lives, is the second or third largest Christian country in the entire world. But he's always had respect for the religion Islam, because Tate believes that you have to have some form of intolerance. Because without intolerance, you don't have rules or laws. And with Islam, you have to earn God's respect. It's not just given to you. Tate goes on to explain how Christianity is a religion that is tolerant. People think that they can do anything, and no matter what they do, God will still love them. And they don't have to do anything to earn God's respect. You could be a bad person and do bad things, and God will still love you. You could be a bad person and do bad things, and God will still respect you. And Tate goes on to explain how this is just something that he does not agree with, and he can't support it. And this is now the reason why he's practicing Islam and not Christianity, because these values in Islam perfectly align with his. Tate sees himself as a person whose respect you have to earn. He sees himself as a person with strong, rigid boundaries. He sees himself as a person who will stand up to people and say, no, that's wrong. He sees himself as a person who is not afraid to stand up to a certain community when he disagrees with their beliefs and what they preach. He ends the discussion saying that he believes Islam is the type of religion that will stand up for itself and say, no, that is wrong. Now, the next discussion in the video is the LGBTQ community. Tate goes on to explain how he doesn't have an issue with gay people. He thinks gay people should be able to live in peace. He thinks they should be able to get married. He has no issue with this. Just like most people, it just doesn't really faze us. He goes on to state that he believes most people genuinely don't care about homosexuality. And he says that he thinks this is what bothers that community. Now, he makes this comparison to when he was living with a woman and she was very upset with him. And he states he just doesn't really care about the argument and just dismisses it. Eventually, she keeps up in the ante until you have to address what's going on and you ask her, what is the problem? He goes on with this comparison and how the current LGBTQ community is similar in this aspect. He states how most people will not care if they want to have a relationship or they want to get married, but once they bring up the issue of, I want to wave my genitals around in your children's face, this is when we have an issue. And I must say that most people probably agree with this. This is now when they get our attention. And he goes on to say how they feel that they have to package all of this together, gay, the lesbian, the trans, and put it all together, because if you're bothered with one, then you're a problem with the entire community as a whole. He goes on to state how somebody who is gay might be very different from somebody who is trans. They begin to discuss the massive movement with the Gays Against Groomers community. How this is a group of gay influencers who are standing up for people trying to push trans issues on children. Tate goes on to say that the only way that he feels that we can protect our children from this is to embrace God in the household. He states that he thinks the only way that we can save kids from this insanity is his God, Allah. He then talks about moving his kids to Dubai or Saudi Arabia, where this stuff is absolutely not allowed and he doesn't have to worry about it being inflicted on his children. Now, later in the interview, Tate goes on to his relationship with his brother, Tristan Tate. He states how Tate is the best brother that he could possibly have ever had, and he thinks that there's no better brother on the planet than his brother, Tristan. He said that growing up, Tate and his brother didn't always get along, but his father would stress to them that the two of them were a team, and he would make them patch it up and get along because he said that the two of you together will be an unstoppable force. He goes on to explain that when they would argue as children, Tate's father would put them in the bedroom and make them stare at each other for 2 hours. And if he heard them say one word, the time would start over again and they would have to sit there for another 2 hours. And after a few years, they became an unstoppable team. Tate uses the example of yin and yang, saying that Tristan is the perfect balance to Andrew Tate's energy. Andrew Tate explains that he is a very hyper, very action-based person who feels things have to be done as soon as possible. More of a panic personality is what Tate says he is. Now, Tate says that Tristan has a gift that he really doesn't give a damn about what anyone thinks about him. An example that Andrew gave was when they were in prison and they would go to court on Monday. Tate would get out of court and find out that he was going to be in prison for a little bit longer. He would go into panic mode, he couldn't sleep, he couldn't relax, he was freaking out in his cell. And Tristan would come back from court and he would just yell, "It's all a scheme from the Matrix, I'm going back to sleep." And he would just lay down and go to sleep and just acted like absolutely nothing would bother him. Tate goes on to explain how this type of energy is exactly what he needed with him in his cell in prison. The next topic of discussion I was very interested to hear was Elon Musk's Neurolink. Patrick David explained to Andrew Tate what exactly Neurolink was and how it was going to give people the ability to be advanced human beings by just placing a chip into their brain. The first thing that Tate says is he's glad that he's not younger. Now, what he means by this is that he's glad that he doesn't have to grow up with this and see what the world is going to become of it. He thinks the average person who doesn't have the Neuralink is not going to be able to compete with people who have Neuralink. He thinks that there's going to be absolutely no chance that they can compete, and the only way that you're going to be able to thrive in the next society is if you have Neuralink. Now, one of his main concerns with Neuralink was, will they be able to just shut you off with this chip in your brain? Will they be able to instill the Matrix upon you and you have no fighting chance against it? And he just basically thinks that you're not going to be able to function in society without it. Now, Patrick asked Tate if he would be worried about this Neuralink and him having more children. Now, Tate states that he, of course, would be a little worried about it, but Tate believes that if he instills these same values that he was taught as a kid onto his children and also instilled God into their life, he thinks it would not be a problem. And now we get into American politics. Patrick asked Tate what he thinks of the upcoming election in 2024 with our possible candidates of Biden, Trump, and DeSantis. Before asking Tate his opinion on the matter, he states that YouTube came out and stated that they are now allowing both sides of the political spectrum to speak freely and not worry about being silenced anymore. Now, Tate speaks about how he is a huge fan of Trump and how he also likes what DeSantis has done with Florida. He stated that he could not choose between the two and he thinks either or would be a great candidate to run America. He also stated how it was an incredibly great direction for YouTube to take this angle with allowing both sides of the political spectrum to speak freely. And he just stated that he hopes that America has a safe and a free election, and he thinks that every single country on the planet deserves this. He then states that America has the public consciousness overall, and whichever side wins, it's going to greatly affect the outcome of the global world, because he states that America is still the superpower of the world today. Now, things got very interesting at this point of the interview because Tate looked directly at the camera and stated that he doesn't care what happens after he says what he's about to say. He says that he's probably going to get locked up and put in jail anyway. And then he goes off to say that if you don't think what happened to Trump recently with being silenced, with the media attacking him, with his current court cases and indictments, and if you don't think that that's an attack from the Matrix, then what is? The media machine and the legal system work hand in hand. What they'll try to do is they'll try to slander people's names, run them through the dirt, and get the general public to dislike this person. So when the time comes and they can hit them with a guilty plea, most of the public agrees that this defendant should be guilty, and then people will no longer look into it or even care. Now, Adam currently looks at Tate and asks him, how much do you, Tate, see yourself in Trump? There's been a lot of similarities between you two. Tate and Trump were both canceled. They're both slandered by the media, and they're both facing legal battles. Tate goes on to say that he feels he is much more at risk than Trump because Trump is a lot older and Trump could just try to outlast them. Tate is a lot younger on the other hand, and he feels his life is more at risk. He states because the people who are following him are young gentlemen who are looking up to masculine men. Now, as I stated in a previous video that I made, they're trying very hard to take away masculinity and make it so it's almost frowned upon. So nobody can stand up and revolt. If you have a society of weak men, it's going to be very easy to control them. Tate goes on to make a point of what is he trying to say to these young men that is so bad. He tells them to go to the gym, stick up for yourself, believe in God, you're allowed an opinion, study hard, work hard, and be smart. Believe in yourself and have standards. Now, he believes that the people in power don't want men to have standards because as soon as they do, they lose control. Tate goes on to say that a bunch of sad, depressed amongst men is one of the most detrimental things to a society. He believes that these type of men are the ones who are doing these horrendous acts like school shootings and public shootings. Now Patrick wanted to bring up the issue with guns in America. He asked him how come we didn't have any issues with gun violence in the 50s, but now we're having it today. He wants to know what's the difference. How come it wasn't happening then, but it's happening now? Guns were just as available then as they are now. Tate believes that all of these issues that are currently happening all fall back on the family. He states back in the 50s and 60s, people obeyed their parents, and their parents had a family name to honor. And there was a degree of responsibility instilled in the family then. He stated that there was a responsibility instilled in people, accountability, honor, and pride. He stated that back in the day, people didn't want to do outlandish things because they didn't want to tarnish their family name, because then the entire family would be known as criminals. And now when you see a school shooting, the family goes on the news and states that he was let down by the system, or it was the laid-back gun laws that caused the issue. They don't take any accountability. This is what happens when you remove honor and pride from people. If you have no honor and pride, nothing matters. Tate's solution comes back down to family values and God. Now at this point in the interview, you could tell Patrick was getting a little irritated because he kept coming back to this and asking Andrew for a simple solution on how to fix America. But it seemed that Andrew Tate couldn't really give him a good answer. He kept stating it's very hard, it's very hard. He says it's not as simple as a cut and dry answer. But he states that he thinks the best way to fix this is to instill God back into people and hold some degree of morality and standards for both sexes. And he believes things will eventually start to get better. Now that pretty much wraps up the entire podcast. I wasn't able to watch all the points on it, so I encourage you that once it's released, you watch the entire thing. These messages need to get out to society, and if you're like me and you're tired of the way that this country is going, get out there and share this message. Like this video, drop a comment on this video, and subscribe if you enjoy this content from the channel. Thanks for joining everyone, and remember, stand up for what you believe in.